CZN's dev team sat down one beautiful morning to discuss the direction of their next character. It's been several patches since launch, so it was time to reiterate on the Nuka archetype. After all, people love big damage. But they knew one thing: no one wants more of the same, so they came up with a list of features for Haru 2.0. First, her nuke should be constantly available without any card draw gimmicks. Then, it should be highly versatile, allowing her to tech into more single target damage, shielding or AoE. She should have synergy with multiple mechanics like exhaust and counterattacks for long-term value. And for good measure, let's have her be self-reliant without the need for an AP battery. And thus, 9 was born.
これは痛むぞ。準備は終わった。もっと正確に。これは痛むぞ。急げ、もっと早く。これは痛むぞ。準備は終わった。もっと正確に。これは痛むぞ。艦長、さすがです。好きにあがいてみな。これは痛むぞ。急げ。一掃してやろう。準備は好きにあがいてみな。急げ。もっと正確に。これは痛むぞ。さっきの準備は終わった。急げ。もっと早く。これは痛むぞ。切ってやろう。これは痛むぞ。
Now if you're already sold on the character but in need of additional gacha funds, I recommend using Lootbar, an affordable and secure recharge platform. Through their site, you can purchase any in-game pack at a discount, with limited time offers reducing prices up to 30%. For example, a 6,480 crystal pack that normally costs $100 in-game is available for around $70 on Lootbar. Once you've made your selection, you can choose your preferred top-up method. Lootbar conveniently offers a self-top-up option that launches a single-use cloud instance, meaning you don't have to share your login information directly. You simply log in as usual, select your server, and purchase the same item you chose on Lootbar from the in-game shop. After clicking buy, Lootbar handles the payment process, which usually only takes a few seconds. Once the purchase is complete, the items are delivered normally, and you can safely log out and clear your data. Overall, the process is quick, secure, and includes a refund guarantee in case of technical issues. If you're hesitant about using a third-party top-up service, feel free to check Lootbar's reviews on Trustpilot. They currently hold an impressive 4.9 rating across more than 30k reviews. If you don't want to miss out, use my link in the description or pinned comment to sign up and receive an additional 10% coupon for new users. 9's gameplay is very straightforward. Buff and rank up her nuke to dish out big numbers. The core of her kit is the 3-cost card Hew, around which everything else revolves. Hew squeezes in as many tags as possible, and the combination varies with the epiphanies. Understanding how these synergize is crucial when building a deck to fully embrace a particular playstyle. There's also a difference when it comes to the final Hew rank, adding a little more nuance. One thing that all versions have in common though is the exhaust tag, which is a trigger to rank up Hew. However, the actual rank up mechanic happens via a new tag called Incinerate. This takes effect when a card is exhausted. The purpose of this extra tag is to ensure that Hew is leveled up even when the card is not actively played. Now, before this turns into an extensive kit reading session, let's rather explore these effects in action. That should make the fundamentals a lot clearer. Here we have an unleveled version of Hew, essentially a rank 0 card. To rank it up for a higher damage multiplier, we need to trigger Incinerate by exhausting the card. It can be exhausted by playing it or by targeting it with an exhaust effect. Here, we're using a different card to do the latter. This is one example where Incinerate comes into play without actively playing Hew. Now we have a rank 1 Hew in hand, which we play indirectly this time. This puts a rank 2 Hew in hand. As we end our turn, the ephemeral tag activates, which is another way to passively exhaust a card. This ranks up Hew to its third and final version. Note that in this process, you can play Hew multiple times per turn if your AP allow for it, but the final rank ends the cycle. Then, the ephemeral tag is swapped for a retain tag, and once the card is used, you have to wait until the next turn before Incinerate puts Hew back into your hand. This is important to keep in mind, because indirectly exhausting the final Hew rank is a mistake that costs you your turn. Every epiphany of Hew offers a different playstyle, and there are really no bad choices, though some may be more niche. Before we go through the variants, we should quickly introduce Fighting Spirit, because it will continuously appear throughout the gameplay. This is a cost-effective way of playing Hew multiple times per turn, as it activates 9's highest cost attack card in hand, after which that card is exhausted. Hew does so by default, so the latter part is there to warn you that without Hew in hand, you're exhausting whatever other card you may activate instead. For most builds, Fighting Spirit is the card you want to duplicate, as it will make 9 less dependent on AP support. Unfortunately, it's not an Epiphany card, so there's no chance for a zero-cost Divine Epiphany. But back to Hew. The most generic variant is Hew Extreme. Unlike all other versions, this one goes up to rank 5 for a final multiplier of 1000% without any potentials or 1200% at max potentials. However, the ranks before that have lower multipliers than the alternatives, so it is best suited for a deck and setup in which you quickly cycle the cards. In this example, we're starting the turn with a rank 1 Hew, which gets activated by 9's upgrade card. Now, with 3 copies of Fighting Spirit in hand, we're iterating all the way to the 5th rank of Hew. Note that the final rank of Hew has a reduced cost of 2 AP, which is true no matter which Hew variant you choose. There's another way to immediately jump to the final rank, but it's much less generic, so we'll save that for later. All other variants of Hew have only 3 ranks with identical multipliers. They differ in some detail or utility they offer, which influences the other cards of your deck. You should pay attention to their tags, as these slightly vary depending on the playstyle they are intended for. For instance, the Ambush variant has Retain instead of Ephemeral, and Flash has a new tag called Ignition. Another straightforward variant is Hew Massacre. It changes Hew into an AoE attack that is made more generic by adapting its multiplier according to the number of targets on field. Here, against 4 opponents, Hew deals 40% less damage, which still grants it a decent enough multiplier even at rank 0. After taking care of the summons, the damage reduction is only 10%, which is what you get in single target fights. This makes Massacre viable in both multi and single target content, though obviously it is less suited for strictly single target boss battles. That said, for most content, the single target damage of Hew Extreme can be a little excessive, and without a good draw she might even struggle against multiple targets. Therefore, Massacre is often a good alternative, especially when you don't care for the big number screenshot. Hew Ironclad is a more defensive option, generating a meaty shield alongside Hew's decent damage. The shield doesn't scale with the ranks and always stays at 200% without potentials. Ironclad can be used in almost any setup, either when 9 needs to provide sustain for the team or simply for a more comfortable chaos experience. Here, one hit of Hew grants a shield worth about 300 HP, all the while dealing decent damage. This is not too different from Khalif's Vulture Ejection, though Hew Ironclad is single target with higher multipliers. The final 2 variants of Hew are intended for very specific setups. As mentioned before, Hew Ambush swaps the Ephemeral tag for Retain, as it will now activate automatically upon a counterattack. Note that this gets triggered by 9 or anyone else on the team. Here, as we end our turn, Ambush remains in hand due to Retain. As the opponent triggers a counter from 9, Hew gets activated right after. To make effective use of this, you obviously need counterattacks on at least one person on the team. For maximum efficiency of her Ambush build, which includes specific epiphanies on her other cards, you prefer everyone to have them though. Note that as with other Hew variants, the final rank comes with a downtime. So if the rank 3 Hew is played during your turn, you're not getting another one for the enemy's turn. That's fine when the opponent doesn't plan an attack, but otherwise you might as well use your AP differently. Lastly, Hew Flash is meant for exhaust team setups. It has the Ignition tag, which lowers its cost by 1 when any card is exhausted. Here, as Serenial's lasers get exhausted, Hew's cost is lowered to 0. Once used, the next rank starts over at the default cost. Like the Ambush variant, Flash also exchanged the Ephemeral tag for Retain, meaning you're highly reliant on a lineup that exhausts cards regularly to rank up Hew efficiently. Note that the cost lowering effect of Ignition is carried over to the next round though, so whatever progress you're making is maintained. Before moving on to 9's other cards, there are 2 things worth noting with regards to Hew. First, characters like Ray, who can target other cards for exhaustion, work extremely well with 9. Since snack time exhausts itself afterwards, it's only worthwhile for short battles, but this is a mechanic to look out for in future characters. Secondly, neutral epiphanies like this don't work well with Hew, as they don't extend to the ranked up versions of the card. With this, you're applying Vulnerable at rank 0, but with none of the other ranks. The same is true for Divine Epiphanies. Here, the cost of Hew is lowered by 1. But the next rank has a default cost of 3, making it quite pointless. Next, Counterblade is an upgrade card that, with the exception of the variant on the right, grants 9 Honed Edge. This buff stacks up to 3 times, boosting her defense-based damage by 20% per stack for 1 turn. Contrary to what I initially assumed, only the Honed Edge Plus buff applies to the entire team, which is something that is reserved for setups with counterattacks. That doesn't necessitate that 9 gains counterattacks herself, but you'd at least need someone like Magna on the team for reliable Honed Edge generation. The most basic variant comes with an initiation tag and activates upon shield gain. Here, as 9 generates a shield via one of her cards, she receives 1 stack of Honed Edge. The current stack count is indicated by the sword and shield icon next to her picture. Now the damage of Hew is boosted, and since we're using the Ironclad variant, we're getting a second stack afterwards. Stacking Honed Edge to its limit is challenging when 9 is the only shielder on the team, especially since she'd want the buff before activating Hew. Notably, this neutral card makes 9 more self-reliant for shorter fights, allowing her to stack up Honed Edge at 0 cost. It can be used to create a shield 3 times in a row before it exhausts itself, perfectly synergizing with Counterblade. It also provides a spore at the end, which you can use to make a screenshot to impress your friends. When you're not running a shield-heavy lineup, you have another option with this variant of Counterblade that grants Honed Edge when a card is exhausted. Of course, Hew itself gets exhausted as you play it, here granting 1 stack. As with the shield variant, you're kind of relying on 9's teammates to help with the stack generation, as she can't properly stack the buff before activating Hew. Serenial is again one option who regularly exhausts her lesser lasers. 9 can tag into a dedicated exhaust build, but my guess is that her ideal partner for that is yet to be released. One interesting epiphany forgoes Honed Edge for a bonus Hew activation at the start of your turn. This can be useful for a more spammy playstyle, where your goal isn't to buff up a single big nuke, but rather to cycle Hew quickly. It best pairs with the Extreme variant that goes up to rank 5, as that is harder for 9 to cycle within 1 or 2 turns. Here, I'm ending the round with the rank 0 Hew. It levels up by ending the turn via the Ephemeral tag and then gets fired off via Counterblade, upgrading it to rank 2. Now, another salvo of Hew follows via multiple copies of Fighting Spirit. As we transition to the next round, a new opponent gets what he had coming. One disadvantage to this automatic firing can be that Hew is directed at the wrong target. It's also a feels bad moment when you're at the final rank of Hew, as your turn starts with multiple options to buff your damage, but instead it gets activated before you can do anything and Hew is gone. With a bit of experience you may learn to play around this, which is to say you would ideally try to avoid starting a new turn with the final rank of Hew in hand. Lastly, this version of Counterblade upgrades Honed Edge to a team-wide buff, though only when at least one combatant gains counterattacks. 9 can gain counterattacks via another card, but with our current roster, you'll probably only run this on a lineup that focuses on the mechanic and runs on defense-based damage. One of the best allies for the task would be Magna, who gains multiple stacks of counterattacks when shields are obtained. That quickly stacks up the bonus for the team, boosting both the counterattacks and any defense scaling attacks. To state the obvious, this variant of Counterblade is best paired with Hew Ambush, which activates upon a counter. Next, Experienced Strike is a 1-cost card that always generates a shield based on 20% of the damage dealt. That part is mostly relevant when you're using a version of Counterblade that grants Honed Edge upon shielding. Unlike 9's previous cards, there is a clear winner amongst the epiphanies. This version grants a multiplicative 30% damage bonus to all exhaust cards for an entire turn. This applies to any number of Hews you can fire off within a round, but also to exhaust cards of other teammates. The general flow of combat is to first activate Counterblade and then use Experienced Strike. This generates a shield for 1 stack of Honed Edge and provides a 30% damage boost for a total bonus of 50%. One noteworthy alternative would be a neutral epiphany that applies Vulnerable to the target. The base version of Experienced Strike only confers 20% bonus damage rather than 30%, but Vulnerability is an extremely potent debuff for a big single hit attack like Hew. Especially with a Divine Epiphany like this, which applies 3 stacks of Vulnerability, is worth considering. The only other acceptable epiphany would be this variant that provides a stack of Counterattack when a card is exhausted. This is 9's aforementioned method of slotting into a lineup around counterattacks. If there's going to be a support that exhausts cards regularly, 9 could also use this variant to reliably activate Honed Edge Plus for a defense scaling team. Note that if you activate multiple copies of this within one turn, you're increasing the number of stacks gained. Here, I'm using Experienced Strike twice. After using Hew, which is the exhaust trigger, 9 gains 2 stacks of counterattack. It's a decent target for duplication in ambush build, as you're not necessarily looking for 4 copies of Fighting Spirit. Now, one highly situational variant is this one, which grants a 60% additive damage bonus to Experienced Strike itself per exhaust card in hand. This should always grant at least one stack of the bonus with Hew in hand, but you will need a partner that reliably cycles exhaust cards each turn to compete with a 30% multiplicative damage bonus. This could work with characters like Serenial, Renoa, Luke or Charon, but keep in mind that the final rank of a non-extreme Hew has a multiplier of 840%. To compete with the about 250% bonus granted by the multiplicative buff, you'd need to have at least 3 more exhaust cards to make it worthwhile. Not to mention that the 30% boost applies to all exhaust cards for the team for an entire turn and not just to a single attack. So rather than having the exhaust cards of others contribute damage to this variant, why not buff their and Hew's damage instead? Finally, Fatal Strike is another card that offers multiple viable alternatives. The effects differ quite drastically, and most of them have their purpose for a specific playstyle. Notably, you have again variants that synergize with exhaust and counterattacks. The most generic variant is simply this one that deals damage and exhausts the highest cost exhaust card on hand, which in all likelihood will be Hew. Here, with the 3 cost Hew in hand, Fatal Strike gets 60% bonus damage to its attack for roughly a 600% multiplier. Note that this variant is again a neutral epiphany that applies vulnerability to the target. As mentioned before, this is useful when chained with Hew and preferable over the regular upgrade that just boosts Fatal Strike's damage a little more. After playing the card, Hew is exhausted and replaced by a higher rank for an even stronger attack. Be careful with this card though, as you must avoid using it when you have the final rank of Hew in hand. Otherwise, you're essentially discarding your nuke for the turn. This epiphany of Fatal Strike changes it to a high cost skill card that ranks up Hew to its final level. It has both retain and ignition tags, meaning it will lower its cost as you exhaust cards and remain in hand until you're able to make use of it. Its best use case is with Hew Extreme, allowing you to skip up to 5 rank ups. As with the other cards, 9 by herself is too slow to benefit from this effect, so you need a teammate to reliably exhaust cards. Here you can see how the cost drops as Serenial exhausts her lesser lasers, allowing 9 to skip 3 rank ups for free. Unfortunately, this variant cannot be duplicated, so you'll also need a setup that quickly cycles your deck. Otherwise, you'll likely end up ranking up Hew halfway before getting back Fatal Strike. This variant also plays around exhaust, this time by exhausting up to 2 exhaust cards from teammates to grant up to 60% multiplicative bonus damage for 9. The condition is more specific than the previous epiphany, because most characters don't want you to exhaust their cards, the only notable exception being Charon, but I'm assuming there will be another character in the near future. Here, Charon creates Futility, which 9 exhausts via Fatal Strike for 60% bonus damage for her next attack. This also lowers the cost of Charon's card, which illustrates some decent synergy between the two. Note that the damage bonus carries over to the next round if you don't have the AP to fire off Hew immediately. It's also worth noting that Fatal Strike can also be used with just 1 exhaustible card in hand, granting 30% bonus damage instead. Lastly, we have another epiphany specifically intended for a counterattack setup. This turns Fatal Strike into a nuke that competes with the lower ranks of Hew. Now, the attack gains an 80% multiplicative damage bonus for each ally owning counterattack stacks, meaning up to 3 times for a whopping 240% bonus. At 3 stacks, this amounts to a 600% damage multiplier, making it comparable to a rank 1 Hew. Now that you're familiar with 9's cards, it's time to put everything together. A common setup looks like this. You're aiming for 3 to 4 copies of Fighting Spirit to spam Hew at reduced cost. For single target fights, you want to use this with Hew Extreme, else Hew Massacre. Experienced Strike will always be the variant that provides a 30% damage bonus to exhaust cards, unless you're running a counterattack build. Fatal Strike should maintain the ability to exhaust Hew in hand for the free rank up, either with a regular epiphany, or with a neutral one that applies vulnerability, or a cost lowering divine epiphany. For single target purposes, the Counterblade variant that activates Hew at the start of turn is a decent choice for even more Hew spamming. Choosing other variants depends on the team setup, meaning you're either going for honed edge via shielding or exhausting, whichever the team does more of. Here's a showcase of a defense-based team alongside Khalib and Naja. Not much is happening on turn 1 besides activating Counterblade. As your turn ends, Hew ranks up and gets fired off at the enemy on the next round. With a bunch of fighting spirits in hand, we get to pummel the enemy repeatedly until the next wave appears for another automatic activation of Hew. Naja brings some additive bonus damage, but her synergy with 9 is actually not as great as the developers made it out to be. Her additive bonuses work better with low multipliers and multi-hit attacks. Now we have a turn with both Experienced and Fatal Strike in hand. Fatal Strike exhausts Hew, ranking it up to its final level, while Experienced Strike confers 30% bonus damage. I should have used the cards the other way around, because Fatal Strike applied vulnerability to the target, which was then consumed by Experienced Strike. Learn from my mistakes. Speaking of mistakes, this is another one. Ending your turn with a rank 4 Hew means Counterblade fires off the final rank on the next round. With multiple ways of buffing Hew in hand, there was a bit of a damage loss here. Once the Fighting Spirits are back in hand, it's time to dish out another round of hurt. As you can see, this deck is less concerned with buffing one instance of Hew for a single big number and instead spreads the damage over multiple attacks. Depending on your partner, gear and refinements, there are still quite a few damage buffs to be mindful of, but that is true for all setups. You can slightly modify the deck if you want to have a bit more sustain for the team, swapping in Hew Ironclad for Hew Extreme. Duplicating Fighting Spirit is still a priority. The only other change worth considering is swapping Counterblade for the variant with the initiation tag that activates upon shield gain. Next, we'll look at the counter-focus playstyle. This is meant for a defense scaling team, preferably, but not necessarily, where everyone has access to counterattacks. Quite simply, this deck uses all the card variants that mention counterattacks. Your priority for card duplication is still Fighting Spirit, though I'd suggest at least one copy of Experienced Strike for the more reliable stack gain on 9. Copying Fatal Strike is only worth doing when everyone on the team uses counters. In this example, I'm using Khalib with neutral epiphanies that grant counterattack stacks, otherwise Maribel would be a better choice. 9 uses Experienced Strike before Hew, so that she gains stacks when Hew is played. This requires Fighting Spirit in hand or a battery support, so having another copy of Fighting Spirit is a good idea. Alternatively, a cost-lowering Divine Epiphany also does a trick. Counterblade grants a team-wide defense-based damage bonus whenever counter stacks are gained. Magna is particularly suited in providing these stacks for the team, since she gains counters whenever a shield is obtained. This boosts everyone's damage, including counterattacks, and of course Hew, which here is activated due to the counter trigger. Fatal Strike is best used when everyone has counterattack stacks, since that boosts its damage by 80% per ally. Other than that, you're mainly going to enjoy the setup against opponents that attack regularly, preferably with multi-hit attacks. Finally, this deck is an example of a setup focused around exhaust. Despite multiple Epiphany reroll attempts, I did not manage to get Hew Flash for this deck, so we'll have to imagine I had that instead of the Extreme variant. Experienced Strike buffs exhaust card damage as usual, and Counterblade grants Honed Edge upon exhaust. Hew Flash lowers its cost whenever a card is exhausted. Fatal Strike uses a variant that targets the exhaust cards of teammates, boosting 9's damage further. Currently, her only realistic partner for the setup is Charon, but I'm sure there will be another one soon. If you don't have Charon, you could use this variant of Fatal Strike instead, which works with any exhaust-centric character. You may consider using Hew Extreme in that case though, as you're getting free rank ups. The general gameplay loop would look like this. First, an ally needs to have exhaustible cards in hand. Here, Charon creates 2 futilities. 9 uses Experienced Strike to buff exhaust card damage by 30%, which also affects the allies' cards. Then, Fatal Strike exhausts the futilities, granting 60% bonus damage and 2 stacks of Honed Edge for another 40%. That is a total multiplicative damage bonus of 130%. Note that this would also lower the AP cost of the Hew Flash variant, making a battery like Mika less of a necessity. Hew is boasting an impressive multiplier by now, though it is also being boosted by other sources such as stage buffs and gear. As you can see, it is a build that buffs Hew's damage more so than any other. A setup with Charon can feel a little clunky at times though, since he is quite AP hungry. Once a new character releases who synergizes with this side of 9's kit, I'd expect it to perform exceedingly well. Before moving on, let's briefly talk about 9's Ego skill. It is an AoE attack that boosts its damage by 50% per AP of the sum of the 2 highest cost cards in hand, after which they are exhausted. Here, these are Hew and Serenial's Cobalt Light. Their combined cost is 6, granting a bonus of 300% to the Ego skill's multiplier. This makes for a fine nuke and helps rank up Hew, but it also means that you're potentially exhausting an ally's card that you'd rather not. Cobalt Light is one such example, or even worse, Khalib's Vulture Ejection. This is acceptable for shorter fights like Chaos, but I feel this is another case where we can expect an upcoming character to synergize better with 9 than what our current roster offers. Continuing with 9's partner options. Her signature partner Alcia grants 8% defense at baseline, as well as a 20% multiplicative damage bonus for one attack and a shield when Hew is exhausted. The shield gain effect is active until Hew is used for the first time. When hovering the basic version of Hew back and forth over the target, you can see Alcia's shield gain effect. After the attack, the shield portion of Alcia's passive is removed and the damage buff activates. The next attack will enjoy 20% bonus damage but won't create another shield. When ending your turn without playing another attack, the buff is carried over to the next round. We're also gaining back the shield effect of her passive. When starting the turn with an attack other than Hew, Alcia's damage bonus is consumed. However, since Fatal Strike exhausted Hew, the buff is gained back immediately after. This occurs only once per round, but remember that the buff was still active from the previous turn. This carryover effect occurs regularly when you didn't activate Hew, and it gets exhausted at the end of the round via its ephemeral tag. Then, you're technically gaining Alcia's buff at the end of the round and are able to activate it again on the next one. Her ego skill deals damage and applies 5 stacks of the debuff Caustic Remarks. This essentially works like vulnerability, increasing the damage taken by 20 or 30% depending on whether you're shielded or not. With Alcia's passive and her ego skill, you're looking at up to 50% multiplicative bonus damage for 9. Alongside all the other damage bonuses that 9 has going on, including some of the new arena gear and refinements, you can achieve juicy multipliers. In this example, Hew was at roughly 5000%. Caustic Remarks can also be stacked alongside the regular vulnerability buff for up to 80% increased damage taken. Overall, Alcia is an incredibly strong partner and 9's most relevant breakpoint if you're looking to invest a little extra. As for alternatives, there are no great options. Wilhelmina provides a solid 24% defense bonus at E4, but the other part of her passive provides only immediately additive damage bonus that is irrelevant. Rachel is largely irrelevant unless you're running 9's counter build. Even then, she should be maxed so that she provides counterattacks a little more reliably. Similarly, the 3-star Radel is also usable on a counter build, as it grants 16% bonus damage so long as you maintain a counterattack stack. Unfortunately, the counter build is quite niche, so realistically, Wilhelmina is your best and most generic option. Lastly, the Battle Pass partner Aishlin is quite underwhelming. She again relies on gaining counterattack stacks, but even then only provides 15% additive bonus damage. Don't get her for 9. The visuals are quite pleasing though. 9's first ego manifestation allows her to select a target with Fighting Spirit. This is useful when using any other variant than Massacre against multiple opponents, but I'd say Alcia far outweighs the E1 in value. If you're building a deck for multi-target fights with Hew Massacre and Hew Extreme for most other content, you're not gaining much from her E1. It does make you a little more flexible when it comes to her more niche exhaust or counter builds, as those can't be too picky about the particular features of a stage. Her E2 grants a 0-cost skill card at the start of battle that can be used twice to apply vulnerability and deal 1 tenacity damage. It's somewhat similar to Serenial's E2 that activates only at the start of battle for 2 bonus lasers. It's not too bad for Chaos, but otherwise not a big deal. The exhaust can be used to immediately activate Alcia's bonus damage though, so that's at least something. Her E3 boosts the damage of her ego skill, increasing its base multiplier and the additive bonus. This makes for a fine AoE nuke, but as usual, the E3 by itself doesn't matter much. 9's E4 is a bit strange, as it is the only effect in her kit that grants an additive rather than a multiplicative damage bonus. When Hew is exhausted, she gains 150% bonus damage for her attack cards for that turn. This is kind of bad, and I wonder if this may be a translation error. For one, the bonus only activates after Hew is exhausted, and then Hew often reaches multipliers around 2000% and above, making this kind of bonus largely irrelevant. If there's something that I'm missing here, leave a comment below. Lastly, 9's E6 adds 15% of the damage dealt by Hew as bonus fixed damage to the target. Since this scales directly off the final damage dealt by Hew, it's a quite potent upgrade. Depending on the build you're running, most of 9's damage comes from Hew, so you may indeed be looking at roughly a 15% damage increase. The gain would be much lower for the counter build though. Overall, I reiterate that I strongly recommend going for Alcia over 9's dupes. Due to a lack of good alternatives, she provides much greater value than any of 9's ego manifestations. Next, for 9's potentials, you should prioritize upgrading the unique card multipliers, as this will boost Hew's damage significantly. Your other priority is her final note, which grants 5% bonus order damage when reaching 300 defense, plus up to another 10% when reaching 350 defense. Note that this doesn't take bonuses from the partner passive or save data gear into account. I'm currently at 336 defense, so I'm getting 11% bonus aura damage in total. I'd have to get better memory fragments to gain the missing 4%. On that note, I'm running the line of Justice for 20% bonus crit rate for Hew and the 2 set for 25% crit damage. The new Beast's Yearning set is also viable as it grants a multiplicative 30% damage bonus for Hew. If your crit rate is very low, you're better off farming this set. Until you have decent pieces, I'd wager that the Line of Justice set outperforms this one simply because we had more time farming good substats. Know that the other new set, Glory's Reign, does not work for 9. You need to create or use exhaust skill cards. Hew is an attack card, so unfortunately 9 can't use the set to support the team. Finally, the new Seasonal Chaos, Burning Life, has some amazing gear and refinement options that are tailor-made for 9. This purple weapon is ridiculously good, providing 40% bonus damage for Hew. If you're lucky, you can refine it for more bonus damage, for instance 25% for 2 cost or higher cards, or here 25% for exhaust cards. This armor piece provides 20% when a shield is gained up to twice per turn. Overall, this chaos is much more gear rather than card focused. On a good run, 9 may end up with around 100% bonus damage irrespective of her deck. This heavily contributes to 9's favorable impression, and I'm somewhat worried that her performance may drop off as soon as the next season comes around that likely doesn't provide such multiplicative damage bonuses. I'm not sure what to think of this reliance on seasonal content to complement or uplift a character's kit. We've seen this before with Yuki and Lab Zero, but it was less glaring because Yuki was undertuned. What do you think? Is this an elaborate marketing scheme or a reasonable approach to character design? With that, we've come to the end of this guide. If you're still on the fence about 9, I'd say she's a well-rounded and highly versatile character that offers multiple playstyles. If any of the decks that I showcased here are to your liking, you can't go wrong with her. I'd also expect one of the upcoming characters to synergize perfectly with her exhaust build, making for another promising archetype. In any case, I won't hold you any longer. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.